years ago, and what it means to them now to serve as they do. We'll hear from Battalion Jones first, Billy Wood second, and then Trooper Woodward third. Come on up, Battalion Jones first. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I've been in the fire service for 38 years. I spent almost 30 years with Richmond, and the last, don't add up the math, but the last 10 years, so maybe a little longer. First day at the station, elderly firefighter, probably my age, I'm elderly now, I guess. He told me, he said, remember two things. Emergency workers are just like life insurance. They're no good to anybody until you need them. And the next thing is, keep repeating to yourself, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. So those two statements have really carried me through. We catch a lot of accolades like we do today, and a lot of times we don't catch accolades. How come you were late getting there? Why did it take so long for the ambulance to get there? Your fire procedure, was it correct, was it not correct? Things like that. So we go in waves, just like the ocean. We're up here one day, and the next day we're at the bottom. But I will assure you, the people in this room, every emergency worker tries as hard as they can every single day. We have things that block us at time getting places. We have things that happen with equipment, things like that every single day. But I will assure you, I am as proud as these guys, any crew I've ever worked with. Station 7 is running almost 4,000 calls a year now, Mike, is that right? More than that, 4,000 calls a year. Those doors are going up. One fire station on Stonewall Parkway. The little lazy county that I went to, quiet, slow county, has changed. Complex has changed. Our situation's changed. So now we've gone to one of the big four now, the Metro Fire Department. Difficult for me to talk right now. I've never really thought about it the day it happened. We deal with things, we just put it out of our minds. That's what I do. I had 5 of my friends that were killed in fires in the city the first 5 years I was there. I felt like that was part of our job. That's what we got paid to do. My goal was to avoid it. Simple as that. But when 9/11 happened, I questioned my courage. I really did. I've been so afraid of going in fires, some of the high-rise buildings in the city, fires that we've had over here. And I think peer pressure made me do some things that helped prod me in the buildings that we probably shouldn't have gone in. But I thought about those firefighters, did they really know that those buildings were going to fall? Have buildings fallen from fires before? Houses collapse all the time. Small buildings collapse, but not a high-rise 110-story building. And when I looked at it this morning, I was watching some of the uncut versions, and I still questioned my courage. I would have probably gone in, as long as I had my guys with me, my crews with me, we would have gone in, we'd have done the exact same thing. But I don't count on us as heroes. I count on us, we do a job that y'all do every day. We're trained, we're paid to do a certain thing, as you are in your everyday life. But this is a day, this 10th year has really struck home. When I think about my tenure in fire service and what happened to those guys. So the first thing I wanted to do was go help them. And I remember my supervisor says, help the living. Help the living. Stay where you are. Help the people in Hanover do the best possible job you can. Which is a very prolific statement. He was exactly right. There's nothing that we could do. Could have gone up and done. There was no survivors. The way that I get through every day, it's not a day, a week that goes by, we don't see anybody that has been severely injured or died. And then with EMS and things that we see every day, I just have to say it's God's will. And I say 9/11, for some reason, was God's will. And the only time we know, if we have the opportunity, when we go to heaven, is to, hopefully I'll get the answers to a lot of my questions. I have questions on there. Hopefully I'll find the answers out. But for some reason, that day was God's will that happened. It brought a stark reality to our country that we were not bulletproof. And I think since that time, we've gone through a lot of different changes that makes us a better place to be. So when you think about 9/11, just think about the firefighters, the police officers, the medics that went in there and just unquestionably served. And we do that every day. So thank you for having me, and I appreciate y'all's time.
Amen.
Pastor Hastings asked me to come here today and give my testimony of where I was and the day and time when it happened, and some of my feelings about that day. On September 11th, I'd been a career September 11th, 2001, I'd been a career firefighter for almost 2 months. I was considered a probationary firefighter. To me, firefighting was the best career in the world, and it was my dream come true. And it still is today. However, I will explain. I was on shift that day with several other probationary firefighters and a supervisor. We were going about our morning routines, checking out the apparatus and making sure everything was ready to go, when suddenly we received a phone call from our battalion chief, Chief Bailey, advising us to turn on the television, which he quickly hung up. I could not believe what we were seeing when we turned on the television. The World Trade Center was on fire. I remember the newscaster saying that a plane had struck the building. At that time, the newscasters were describing the incident as an accident. We were watching intently when suddenly, from the right side of the screen, another plane flew into Tower 2. And it was that point we all realized that this was no accident. Shortly thereafter, the phone rang. It was my father, and he was asking me if I knew about a plane crash in D.C. I had no idea what he was talking about. It wasn't on television yet, so. But then shortly after that, we realized that that was no accident either. We stayed glued to the television. Several of the guys said that they would be willing to give their lives to go up and rescue the victims and fight the fires. But I'll admit, I was scared. I told the guys that it looked like at least one of the towers was leaning and that I would be afraid to go in. Some of the guys gave me a difficult time about that. And that hurt right to the core, because that's what we do. We go in and we save people. But that day I lost my courage, as Chief Jones was commenting with his own testimony. We were continuing to watch. We were all kind of silent. And then suddenly Tower 1 came down and everybody got super quiet. I looked around and saw that everybody had the same scared and shocked look on their faces. Although I regret vocalizing my fear that day, my apprehension to the situation in New York was never mentioned again by anybody on the ship. In the days that followed, I admit that I considered finding another career. But that all changed when I became inspired by the courage, consistency, and brotherhood displayed by the surviving firefighters of the World Trade Center attacks, who never gave up searching for their lost brothers. Thank you, Lord.
Amen.
Thank you, Pastor, for this time here. September 11th, 2001, 10 years ago. I had come back from Romania to go. I'd taken a break. I was a Richmond City officer for 6.5 years, went to the state police in 1988 and was there for 4 years. And God dealt with my heart as far as there's a bigger picture in life. And I left the state police in 1992, went and got a degree in biblical studies, and ended up in Romania in 97. We were missionaries there, my wife and I and our kids, for 10 years. Well, at that time, we'd come back to the States and we were traveling around the U.S., raising support, reporting back to churches. And that day, we happened to be in Albany, New York. We were staying in an apartment there in one of the churches. And somebody invited me to go to a pastor's meeting 2 miles north of Albany. There'd be a bunch of pastors there. It's a great place to meet some people, to maybe get some contacts. And my wife and my children, they stayed back at the church down there in Albany. I went up and I remember sitting in the car and listening to the radio just before going inside and heard about a plane that flew into the World Trade Center. And I didn't think much about it. It's like, well, I remember years back there was a small plane that flew into the Empire State Building. And so I'm just thinking, well, that's a bad accident there as far as flying into the World Trade Center. Turned off the radio, went on inside, and there was men there all gathered around. They were eating danishes and stuff, having time of fellowship. And and all of a sudden somebody rushed in from the back door. But another plane has hit the other building, and we're going, what? There's no way, in my mind, there's no coincidence to that. And we all went ahead and rushed over to another building, went inside, had a big screen television on the wall, and there we watched everything unfold. And in my mind, I'm thinking, America is changed forever. 6 months later, my wife and I were getting on another plane, or on a plane to go back to Romania. Things were totally different. Wasn't as easy anymore. Things were difficult. And as the days unfolded there, and they just played the footage over and over and over about the courage of the firefighters there and how many they lost. I wasn't really thinking about them, but today I'm thinking, for such a time as that they had trained. How much training do we do for such a time? We go to the range, we practice. Not that we get into a lot of firefights, but at that one day, if it ever happens, for such a time as that, you need to be prepared. And there's certain times in our life, we have Irene come through. Are we prepared for that? Are we going to be prepared for the next catastrophe that happens? For such a time, we have insurance. Why? For such a time that something might happen. In my mind, as we reflect back 10 years ago, as far as what happened, those people that lost their lives, that very well can happen to us at some occasion. And I wonder, my question is, for such a time, are you prepared? Are you prepared for whatever may happen for eternity? Life is short. Life is short. Are you prepared for the day that when you die? And to me, it's beyond my understanding how of anyone who would not be prepared would be firefighters and police officers, EMT workers that are around death all the time and realize it can come at any time. It can come at any time. Are you ready? Are you ready? And I look back and think about that for such a time as this. I just want to close with this one verse here. Psalms 128, verse 1. Blessed is everyone that feareth the Lord, that walketh in his ways. When we live our life like that, we don't have to be afraid for such a time as this that may come upon us. Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you.
At this time, if you please take your hymnal and the pew in front of you and turn hymn number 200.